The War Council chamber buzzed with anticipation as delegates from 12 species gathered around the massive holographic display. Captain Zara Chen stood at attention, her uniform crisp despite the 3-day journey to reach this floating fortress in neutral space. She wasn't supposed to be here. Hell, humans weren't even supposed to know about the Galactic War Games. Silence! Commander Threx's voice boomed across the chamber, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of authority. The insectoid alien's compound eyes gleamed with barely concealed amusement as they fixed on Zara. "We have an unexpected participant." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Calarian delegate, a serpentine creature with scales that shifted from blue to violet, hissed softly. "A human? Here? This is unprecedented." Zara's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. 3 months ago, she'd been leading routine patrols along Earth's outer colonies. Then the intercepted transmission changed everything. The Galactic War Games, a contest held every 50 standard years to determine military supremacy among the known species. The winner gained access to advanced technologies and strategic resources that could shift the balance of power for generations. And humanity had never been invited. "Captain Chen," Threx continued, his mandibles clicking with what might have been laughter, "your species has somehow acquired knowledge of our games. Most irregular." "We prefer the term resourceful," Zara replied, earning a few chuckles from the crowd. "And we're here to participate." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages. Some delegates seemed outraged, others curious, and a few downright hostile. Zara had expected this reaction. What she hadn't expected was a cruel smile spreading across Threx's face. "Very well," he said, raising one of his arms for silence. "The rules state that any sentient species may participate, provided they meet the entry requirements." His eyes glittered dangerously. "However, given humanity's reputation for unpredictability, we must impose certain restrictions." Here it comes, Zara thought. She'd read the files on Threx. The bastard loved his games within games. His little power plays designed to humiliate opponents before the real contest even began. "You may participate," Threx announced, "but with one condition. Humans are known for their manual dexterity, their tool use, their reliance on their hands for everything from technology to warfare. Therefore, Captain Chen, you are hereby banned from using your hands during any phase of the competition." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usually chattering Pixari delegates had gone quiet, their feathered crests flattened against their skulls in what Zara recognized as shock. She felt her face flush with anger, but forced herself to smile. "Is that all?" Threx's compound eyes widened slightly. Clearly, he'd expected tears, protests, maybe even a dramatic exit. Instead, Zara was grinning like she'd just been handed the keys to a battle cruiser. "You find this amusing?" the Calarian delegate asked, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Oh, absolutely hilarious," Zara replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think banning my hands will cripple me? You clearly don't know humans very well." The truth was, Zara did feel a moment of panic. Her entire military career had been built around her quick reflexes and precise hand-eye coordination. She was a master of small arms combat, starship gunnery, and close-quarters fighting. But as the initial shock wore off, something else took its place. Something that made her blood sing with anticipation. Pure, unadulterated spite. "The games begin in 6 standard hours," Threx announced. "The first challenge is individual combat simulation. Each participant will face increasingly difficult scenarios in our holographic training matrix. Victory conditions include tactical superiority, casualty minimization, and resource management." As the delegates began to disperse, chattering among themselves about this unexpected development, Zara caught fragments of conversation. The Vorthan representative was already placing bets against her survival past the first round. The crystalline shardlings were discussing the probability matrices of a handless human lasting more than 10 minutes in combat simulation. Captain Chen. The voice belonged to General Kiso, an Altarian whose species looked remarkably similar to humans, except for their silver-blue skin and the extra set of arms. A word. Zara followed him to a quieter corner of the chamber. Kiso's expression was unreadable, but she sensed sympathy beneath his professional demeanor. "This is madness," he said quietly. "Threx has effectively rigged the game against you before it's even begun. There's no shame in withdrawing." "With respect, General, that's exactly what he's counting on," Zara replied. "He want me to quit, to slink back to Earth with my tail between my legs and report that humans aren't ready for galactic politics." "And are you?" Kiso asked pointedly. "Ready, I mean?" Zara's smile turned predatory. "General, let me tell you something about humans. We've been adapting to impossible odds since we first crawled out of caves and decided to hunt mammoth with pointed sticks. You want to take away our hands? Fine, we'll improvise." 6 hours later, Zara stood in the preparation chamber, studying her reflection in the polished metal wall. She'd spent the time reviewing everything she knew about her competitors and running through mental exercises her grandmother had taught her years ago. Funny how childhood memories became relevant in the strangest circumstances. Her grandmother, Chun-Li, had been a master of traditional martial arts, specifically a style that emphasized kicks and footwork. "Hands are tools, little star," she used to say during their training sessions in the family's backyard. "But legs? Legs are weapons. They're stronger, they have longer reach, and most importantly, people never expect them." A chime echoed through the chamber, signaling the start of the first challenge. Zara made her way to the simulation bay, where other contestants were already suiting up in their preferred gear. The setup was fairly standard: neural interface headsets that would immerse them in realistic combat scenarios while monitoring their performance. Contestant Chun, a technician, approached, holding a modified headset, special configuration as per the restrictions. The headset felt heavier than the standard model, probably loaded with additional inhibitors to ensure she couldn't cheat and use her hands. Zara slipped it on, feeling the familiar tingle of neural connection establishing itself. "All contestants, prepare for scenario initialization," announced the overseeing AI. "You will face a series of combat situations of increasing difficulty. Points are awarded based on tactical efficiency, mission completion, and minimization of collateral damage. Begin in 3, 2, 1. The world dissolved into light. When it reformed, Zara found herself standing in a war-torn cityscape. Smoke drifted between collapsed buildings, and the distant sound of weapons fire echoed through empty streets. Her objective appeared as a glowing waypoint 3 kilometers away: extract a high-value target from an enemy-controlled zone. She tried to reach for the weapon at her side, but her arms remained stubbornly motionless. The inhibitors were definitely working. Time to get creative. Zara knelt down and used her teeth to pull the sidearm from its holster, then carefully positioned it between her feet. It took several minutes of awkward maneuvering, but she managed to get a workable grip on the weapon using her feet. Standing up slowly, she found she could aim and fire with reasonable accuracy, though it was far from ideal. The first enemy patrol rounded a corner just as she was getting comfortable with her improvised stance. 3 hostiles in urban camouflage, moving with professional precision. They spotted her immediately but hesitated, clearly confused by her unusual posture. That hesitation cost them. Zara dropped to ground, rolled to her left, and came up firing. The first shot took down the lead soldier. The second wounded the one on the right. The third enemy dove for cover behind a rusted vehicle, but Zara was already moving. She sprinted toward a position, her military training taking over despite the bizarre circumstances. As she approached the vehicle, she heard the telltale sound of a grenade pin being pulled. Instead of retreating, she accelerated. The enemy soldier popped up, grenade in hand, just as Zara launched herself into a flying kick that would have made her grandmother proud. Her boot connected with his wrist, sending the explosive device flying back toward his own position. She landed hard, rolled away, and watched as the grenade detonated safely behind cover. "Well," she muttered to herself, getting back to her feet, "that worked better than expected." The scenario continued for what felt like hours. Zara adapted quickly, using her environment to compensate for her handicap. She triggered enemy traps with thrown debris manipulated by her feet, used doorways and narrow passages to limit enemy movement, and discovered that a well-placed kick could be just as effective as a bullet in close quarters. By the time she reached the extraction point, she'd eliminated 47 hostile contacts and rescued the target with minimal collateral damage. More importantly, she'd done it all without once feeling sorry for herself or wishing the rules were different. As the simulation faded and she found herself back in the preparation chamber, Zara became aware of an unusual silence. The other contestants were staring at her, their expressions ranging from bewilderment to grudging respect. Preliminary scores, the AI announced. Contestant Vex 9, Vorthan Republic, 847 points. Contestant Helix Prime, Crystalline Collective, 901 points. Contestant Zara Chen, Human Federation, 1,203 points. The silence stretched for another moment before someone, she thought it might have been one of the Pixari, started laughing. Not mockery, but genuine amusement and perhaps admiration. Impossible, muttered the Vorthan representative. The scoring system must be malfunctioning. I assure you, the AI replied with mechanical certainty, all systems are functioning within normal parameters. Commander Threx appeared on the chamber's main screen, his compound eyes reflecting what looked like surprise and perhaps a touch of irritation. Impressive, Captain Chun. However, this was merely the first challenge. The remaining tests will prove far more demanding. Zara looked directly into the camera, her smile bright and thoroughly unrepentant. Looking forward to it, Commander. This is just getting interesting. As the contestants filed out to prepare for the next phase, Zara caught sight of General Kiso. The Altarian gave her a small nod of approval before disappearing into the crowd. She had a feeling things were about to get much more complicated. But for the first time since arriving at this floating fortress, she felt truly optimistic about humanity's chances. After all, they'd barely scratched the surface of human adaptability. The real fun was just beginning. The second challenge arena was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. A massive spherical chamber with gravity generators creating multiple orientation zones, floating platforms that shifted position every few minutes, and obstacle courses that defied conventional physics. Contestants would be facing off in team-based strategic combat, with points awarded for both individual performance and group coordination. Teams will be randomly assigned, Commander Threx announced, his voice carrying that same smugness that made Zara want to kick something, preferably his face. Each team consists of 3 members from different species. Communication barriers will test your adaptability under pressure. The randomization display flickered through alien symbols before settling on the team assignments. Zara found herself paired with Crix, a hulking draconian whose species looked like bipedal rhinos with attitude problems, and Whisper, a delicate Etherean whose translucent body seemed to phase in and out of visibility. Great, Crix rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. Stuck with the crippled human and a ghost. This ghost, Whisper replied in a voice like wind chimes, has won 3 regional combat championships, and the human just outscored everyone in individual trials. Zara studied her teammates while the final preparations were made. Crix was obviously a brute force specialist, probably used to charging straight through problems with his natural armor and crushing strength. Whisper appeared to be built for stealth and precision, her species naturally suited for reconnaissance and sabotage. And then there was her, the supposedly handicapped human, who was quickly developing a reputation for turning disadvantages into weapons. Listen up, she said as they were led to their starting position. Crix, you're our heavy assault. Whisper, you're our eyes and infiltration specialist. I'll handle tactical coordination and adaptive problem solving. How exactly do you plan to coordinate anything without hands? Crix asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Zara's grin was sharp enough to cut glass. You'll see. The arena materialized around them, a maze of floating platforms connected by energy bridges that flickered on and off in seemingly random patterns. Their objective: capture and hold 3 strategic points simultaneously for 60 seconds, while preventing enemy teams from doing the same. 6 other teams were scattered throughout the arena, each with their own tactical advantages. The Vorthan team had superior firepower. The Crystalline team could analyze patterns faster than organic minds could process, and the Altarian team had the benefit of natural telepathic communication. Game begins in 10 seconds, the AI announced. 9, 8, 7. Zara was already moving before the countdown finished, running toward the nearest gravity well, and using it to launch herself toward a higher platform. She'd spent the preparation time studying the arena's design, looking for patterns and weaknesses that others might miss. "Follow my lead," she called her teammates. "Crix, I need you to create a distraction at Point Alpha. Whisper, can you phase through that energy barrier and scout Point Beta?" "Already moving," Whisper replied, her form growing even more translucent as she glided through solid matter. The beauty of team combat was that it forced participants to think beyond their individual strengths. Zara watched the other teams spreading out, following predictable tactical patterns. Most were heading straight for the nearest objectives, exactly what the arena designers expected, which meant they were all about to walk into the same trap. "Crick, stop," she shouted. The Draconian skidded to a halt just as the platform he'd been charging towards suddenly rotated 90 degrees, revealing concealed automated defenses. Energy bolts sizzled through the space he would have occupied. "How did you know?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "The pattern," Zara explained, using her feet to manipulate a fallen piece of debris, turning it into a makeshift pointer. "The arena isn't just changing randomly. It's responding to contested movements, trying to funnel us into kill zones." She quickly outlined her observations, pointing out the subtle indicators that preceded each platform shift. The other teams were already discovering the arena's dangers a hard way, with several contestants eliminated by defensive systems they hadn't seen coming. "New plan," Zara announced. "We don't capture the obvious points. We take the ones they don't expect." Point Charlie was positioned in what appeared to be an impossible location, accessible only through a series of rapidly shifting gravity fields that would require precise timing and unconventional movement. Every other team had written it off as too dangerous to attempt. "Perfect. Whisper, I need you to phase to the outer barriers and map the gravity field fluctuations. Crix, you're going to be our anchor point. And I'm going to do something incredibly stupid." "Define incredibly stupid," Crix said, though he was already moving to the position she'd indicated. Zara sprinted toward the edge of their current platform, building up momentum. As she reached the precipice, she dropped to her back and used her legs to push off at precisely the right angle, launching herself into the chaotic gravity field surrounding Point Charlie. The sensation was like being inside a washing machine filled with angry cats. Up became down, left became inside out, and her inner ear gave up trying to process the contradictory information. But she calculated the trajectory correctly, using the competing gravity wells to slingshot herself toward the objective. She landed hard on the target platform, immediately rolling to avoid the automated defenses that track movement. The control console for Point Charlie sat in the center of the platform, protected by a barrier that required simultaneous activation of 3 separate switches. No problem for someone with hands. Nearly impossible for someone without them, unless that someone had spent their childhood learning to use their feet like extra hands. Zara positioned herself carefully, using her left foot to hold down the first switch while her right foot worked the second. The third switch was positioned higher, requiring her to balance on one foot while stretching to reach it with her teeth. "Zara," Crix's voice crackled through the comm system. "Multiple teams converging on your position." "Almost there," she grunted, struggling to maintain her awkward position while the platform shook under defensive fire from approaching enemies. The third switch clicked into place just as the first energy bolt sizzled past her head. Point Charlie was theirs, but holding it would be another matter entirely. "Whisper, status report." "Point Beta is a trap," came the ethereal reply. "The moment anyone captures it, the platform becomes electrified. But Point Delta..." There was a pause. "Point Delta isn't defended at all." Zara's tactical mind processed this information quickly. Point Delta was positioned in the arena's dead center, easily visible to all teams but apparently undefended. Every tactical manual in existence warned against objectives that seemed too easy. But what if it wasn't a trap? What if the arena designers were counting on everyone's paranoia to keep them away from the actual easiest target? "New plan," she announced, dodging another volley of enemy fire. "Crix, abandon Alpha and head for Delta." "Whisper, same thing. I'll hold Charlie as long as possible." "That's suicide," Crix protested. "You can't hold that position alone." "Watch me." The next few minutes were a masterclass in defensive creativity. Zara used the platform's own defensive systems against her attackers, triggering proximity mines with debris kicked in precise directions. She turned the gravity fluctuations into weapons, timing her movements to send enemy combatants spinning off into space. When conventional tactics failed, she improvised. She discovered that the control console could be used as a communications relay, allowing her to hack into enemy team frequencies and sow confusion with false information. "This is Vorthan Team Leader," she announced in her best approximation of their species' vocal patterns. "All teams abort current objectives and converge on Point Alpha. Repeat, new priority target is Alpha." The chaos that followed was beautiful to watch. 3 teams changed course simultaneously, creating a massive firefight at Point Alpha, while Zara's teammates secured their actual objectives unopposed. "Zara," Whisper's voice carried a note of amazement. "You were right about Delta. No defenses at all. It's almost like they wanted someone to figure it out. Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight," Zara replied, finally allowing herself a moment to catch her breath. The arena's countdown timer showed 30 seconds remaining. They held 2 of the 3 required points. But Point Charlie was becoming increasingly difficult to defend as more teams realized what was happening. "Hold positions," she ordered. 29 seconds. "We can do this." A massive explosion rocked her platform as the crystalline team launched a coordinated assault. Their angular forms moved with mechanical precision, each shot calculated for maximum effect. Zara rolled behind the control console, feeling energy bolts singe the air around her. 15 seconds. She heard Crix roar with fury as someone tried to storm Point Delta. The sound of his charge was like thunder, followed by the distinctly unpleasant noise of enemy combatants being introduced to immovable objects at high velocity. 10 seconds. The crystalline team leader materialized on her platform, having somehow bypassed all the defensive systems. His faceted form gleamed with internal light as he raised his weapon toward the control console. 5 seconds. Zara launched herself from cover in a desperate flying kick, her boots connecting with the alien's center mass just as his weapon discharged. They tumbled together off the platform, spinning through the chaotic gravity fields. 3 seconds. She managed to grab onto a passing debris fragment with her teeth, halting her fall while the crystalline warrior continued spinning into space. 1 second. "Victory achieved," the AI announced. Team Designation Zulu has successfully held 3 strategic points for the required duration. As the arena dissolved around them, Zara found herself back in the preparation chamber, her teammates materializing beside her. Crix was grinning broadly, his massive hands patting her shoulders with enough force to buckle her knees. "That," he rumbled, "was the most insane tactical display I've ever witnessed." "Agreed," Whisper added, her form solidifying as excitement overcame her natural translucency. "You turned a hopeless disadvantage into a strategic advantage." The scores appeared on the main display. Team Zulu, 2,847 points. Second place had managed only 1,203 points. They hadn't just won, they dominated. Commander Threx appeared on screen again, but this time his expression was unreadable. Exceptional performance, Team Zulu. However, tomorrow's final challenge will determine the ultimate victor. Individual combat, no teams, no rules except one. Last contestant standing wins. As the other participants filed out, discussing strategy and forming temporary alliances for the final round, Zara noticed something interesting. Several of them were looking at her with newfound respect, but more importantly, they were starting to look nervous. Good. They were finally beginning to understand what she'd known from the beginning. Humans didn't need fair fights. They needed challenges that forced them to evolve, to adapt, to become something more than what they were before. Every restriction, every handicap, every impossible odd just made them more creative. Tomorrow, she'd face the final challenge with the same advantages she'd always had. A human brain that refused to accept limitations and a will that bent reality to her requirements. Commander Threx thought he'd crippled her by taking away her hands. He had no idea he'd just made her infinitely more dangerous. The war games were almost over, and humanity was about to make its mark on galactic history, one devastating kick at a time.